Hey guys, welcome back to the last video for chapter 2. Today we're looking at 2.4 of ACE International History AS level, by the way. So the essential question for this is, why was there dissatisfaction with the peace settlements of 1919 to 1920? So here are the subunits for the lesson. It is a longer unit, so get comfortable. We have 2.4a, which talk about the aims, membership, and structure of the league. 2.4b, the collective security and the league's involvement in the resolution of disputes, the success. And 2.4c is the challenges of this. 2.4d talks about the weaknesses of the league. And 2.4e finally talks about the roles and impacts of the agencies. So 2.4a, the aims, memberships, and structures of the league. Wilson supported the idea of an international organization to prevent future wars, but he was not the first person to suggest it. World War I caused massive destruction and deaths, which made many countries want a system that would stop another disaster. Groups in the USA and Britain had already proposed ideas for an international peace organization as early as 1915. Leaders from countries like France, Belgium, and South Africa also supported creating such an organization. Wilson strongly pushed the idea at the Paris Peace Conference and helped lead the committee that wrote the League's covenant. Delegates struggled to agree on how the League should work, but they eventually created the final covenant in 1919. Many countries became founding members of the League when they signed the Treaty of Versailles. Okay, many leaders believed World War I could have been prevented if an agreement like the League had existed earlier, or like an organization, I guess, not just like an agreement. And the League planned to reduce weapons so countries could not easily engage in war. It banned secret treaties like hidden alliances, caused for fear. Oh, sorry, let me repeat myself. It banned secret treaties because hidden alliances caused fear and misunderstanding before World War One. The League the League would investigate disputes and make binding decisions to settle conflicts peacefully. It created a system of collective security where all members would act together against aggressive countries. Now let's talk about administering the post-war peace settlements. So, the League helped to run plebiscites such as the vote in the Saar to decide whether it belonged to France and Germany. It also oversaw mandates where certain territories were placed under another country until they were ready for independence. Now let's look at promoting international cooperation. So the League worked to improve working conditions worldwide through the International Labor Organization. It helped return prisoners of war and resettle refugees who were displaced after the conflict. Um, the League gave loans to new countries like Austria and Hungary to help them rebuild. So the structure of the League of Nations was another success. The League's main bodies were the General Assembly and the Council, supported by the Secretariat, the Court, the several committees. Now let's talk about the General Assembly. By the way, this is kind of like going into further depth of the structure of the League of Nations. So we're just going to be talking a little bit further on how it was made and like what councils did what. So the first council is the General Assembly, and this assembly met once a year in Geneva, and each country had one vote, even if it sent up to three delegates. It controlled policy, membership, and league finances, and decisions had to be unanimous. So the council. The council met several times a year to handle political disputes and also required unanimous decisions. It required four permanent members at first, later expanding along with several rotating non-permanent members. So next is the secretariat, not which is a non. Sorry, the league. Sorry, I apologize. So this did the league's daily work and published reports and prepared agendas. This was like a role in the league. So the next is the Permanent Court of International Justice. The court in the league settled legal disputes between nations and issued advisory opinions when asked. It had AICE judges elected for 9-year terms and operated from 1922 to 1946. Lastly, is the commissions and committees. The League created groups to work on mandates, disarmament, refugees, slavery, labor, health, welfare, and drug issues. These groups achieved success like freeing slaves, helping refugees, fighting diseases, but made little progress on disarmament workers' rights. Okay, 2.4b, the collective security and the League's involvement in the resolution of disputes. The successes. So the League created a system where members would use economic or military pressures against any countries threatening peace. The Article 16 said any country that ignored the covenant would face sanctions from all League members, and the League planned to review disputes carefully and accept its decisions. Countries that refused decisions would face sanctions or the threat of joint military forces. This system helped the League settle several political disputes during 1920. Let's talk about Teschinen in 1920. So Poland and Czechoslovakia fought over Teschinen, and the League stopped the conflict by dividing the region between them. So next is the Åland Islands in 1921. Sweden and Finland disagreed over the island, but the League decided they would stay with Finland, and both sides accepted the ruling. Sweden publicly expressed disappointment but still accepted the League's decisions. Sweden's statement was biased because it only focused on its own POV. The League's nations was logical because it was based on detail studied and included protections for Swedish culture on the island. The next success is Silesia in 1921. Germany and Poland argued over Upper Silesia, so the League divided the region, and the decision was accepted by both countries. The next one is the Yugoslavia-Albania border dispute in 1921. So the Yugoslavia troops entered Albania, but the League investigated and ordered Yugoslavia to withdraw, which it did. Simple and easy. Next is the Memel in 1921. Lithuania invaded Memel, and the League decided to give most of the area to Lithuania, but keeps the port as an international zone. Next is Mosul in 1924. Turkey wanted Mosul back from Iraq, but the League ruled in favor of Iraq, and Turkey accepted the decision. The last success is the Greece-Bulgaria border dispute in 1925. Greece invaded Bulgaria, and Bulgaria ordered its troops to resist only slightly while waiting for the League to intervene. The League condemned Greece and ordered it to withdraw and pay compensation, with which Greece obeyed. These cases showed the League could settle minor conflicts when all sides accepted its decisions. Okay, now let's talk about the challenges of the League. So, first is Vilna in 1920. Poland seized Vilna from Lithuania, ignored the League's order to withdraw, and kept the territory until 1939, which is almost, I would say, 20 years later. The League failed because Britain and France supported Poland and would not pressure it to leave. The next challenge that they had was the Treaty of Riga in 1921. Poland invaded Russia and took land in the Treaty of Riga, and the League did nothing because Russia was not a member and was disliked by Western countries. The invasion of Ruhr in 1923 was another challenge, where France and Belgium invaded the Ruhr when Germany failed to pay reparations, breaking League's rules, even though both countries were members. Because council decisions needed to be unanimous, the League could not act against them. The problem ended only with the Dawes Plan. Lastly, the Corfu incident in 1923. Italy blamed Greece for the killing of Italian officials and invaded Corfu to force compensation. The League told Italy to withdraw, but Mussolini ignored it and took the case to the Council of Ambassadors, which ruled in Italy's favor. This incident showed the League was weak when a powerful member like Italy chose to ignore or overrule it. Okay, 2.4d, the weaknesses of the League. Created by it was so let's talk about how it was created by an unpopular peace settlement. The League was closely linked to the unpopular Paris peace treaties, and many people saw it as an organization made to benefit the winning nations. Defeated countries were not allowed to join at first, increasing the resentment. So, member states. Only Britain, France, Italy, and Japan were members throughout the 1920s, and Germany joined late. The USSR joined later, and the USA just never joined. The USA's refusal to join the League of Nations would contribute to the major weakness of the League. So Re- Republicans in the USA Senate opposed the League after World War I. Senator Henry Cabot Lodge argued that the League would weaken U.S. independence, and the Senate rejected the League in the 1919, choosing isolationism instead. The League lost credibility and financial support without the USA. So now let's talk about other organizations. The Council of Ambassadors sometimes overruled the League's decisions, and countries often ignored the League and made their own agreements instead. So now the need for unanimity. Sorry, all league decisions had to be unanimous, giving every country veto power. This slowed decision making and made this slowed down decision making and made the league seem weak. Now, collective security. The league depended on collective security to stop aggression. It had no army and relied on member states to provide troops. In 1923, countries were allowed to decide if they would send troops or not. This weakened collective security because states often refused to act. Na- okay, now let's talk about national interest. So, countries often put national interests above their league duties. Britain and France refused to act against Poland or against themselves. The League was only as strong as its members' willingness to support it, which would eventually be its downfall. Lastly, 2.4e, excuse the background noise if you hear it, sorry. So 2.4e talks about the roles and impacts of the agency. Um, So the ILO created by the league and improved working conditions by encouraging limits on hours, minimum wages, and worker benefits. Although some reforms failed because countries faced economic hardships, the International Commission for Refugees, this was led by Frigid of Nansen. The commission helped resettle former prisoners of war and create the Nansen Passport for stateless refugees and provided food, homes during refugee crises. Next is the Health Organization. This dealt with refugees' health problems, studied the causes of epidemics, and helped introduce vaccines to prevent major diseases. Next, the Mandates Commission. This supervised former German and Turkish territories and required reports from Britain and France about it. But it had limited power and made little progress toward independence. Next is the financial assistance. The League provided loans and financial guidances to countries like Austria and Hungary, helping them avoid bankruptcy and begin economic recovery. The other achievements included the League addressed problems like slavery, drug trafficking, child exploitation, and forced reforms in Liberia after uncovering forced labor. Because these agencies were effective, many of them were continued by the UN after World War II. Thank you so much for tuning in to Chapter 2, and I will see you next week for Chapter 3. Bye.